My name is Gary Dro. I'm the CEO at Modern Ice Equipment and Supply. Our organization, a leading supplier to the packaged ice and industrial ice markets, continues to look at meaningful investments on behalf of bringing valuable insights to our industry. The changing operating world we work in certainly requires more insight than at any time in our business lives, and we want to help. Today, our investment in an educational webinar is with operating within a changing world. We have two great professionals joining us today to offer their insights and real-world experiences. We're thrilled to have them joining us. I will introduce Dave and Lee in just a moment, but let me first share with all of you our future educational webinars planned in upcoming months. One of them is going to be a 179 tax credit and tax exempt utilities webinar, an ice maker maintenance webinar, and then the last one we have planned right now is other plant equipment maintenance. So you'll want to look in your emails for those upcoming events. Next, before we introduce our panel for discussion, let me give you a few webinar logistics. First off, at the bottom right of your screen, you'll notice there's a chat window. So let us know if you're experiencing any technical difficulties. Please enter your questions as you think of them throughout the presentation on there, and we'll go over those at the end and offer any insights or comments through that chat window. The Q&A session will be at the end of the webinar. We'll allow our presenters to present, and then we'll go through and answer as many questions as time will allow. And any newer follow-up questions can still be asked as we're doing the Q&A. Also, so you all know, a link to this recording will be sent to you. So if you want to go back and view it or share it with others within your business, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Again, today, Modern Ice sponsors operating in a changing world. As our organization had to reinvent itself in some ways, play by new rules, and adjust on the fly, we assumed many of our clients did as well. Our engagement today is to bring insights from outside our industry to broaden our perspectives on many topics. The president of Harmony will be sharing his insights in their operations in this business climate. Additionally, our largest and best investment are each of our employees. Recognizing that many different aspects that we have faced these past months with our employee groups, Modern has engaged an employment attorney who has been at a capacity of about 200% for the past 6 months to share his perspectives. Our goal is to have them speak about 10 to 12 minutes each and cover their views on when all this news broke, their path during this time, and what have been some of their forward thoughts based on what we've learned or they've experienced. Our panel today is Dave Richard, who is the president of Harmony. Harmony is an injection molding company with about 165 employees up in Piqua, Ohio. Lee Geiger is an employment attorney with Graydon Law Firm here in Cincinnati. And Dave, we're going to start with you. I guess start with us with when this all started. What was your first insights, or how did you get a perspective on this whole event? What was your perspective on this whole event?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Thanks for the introduction. So, yeah, let me take you back to that, what I call the fateful day in March. Depending on your how you remember it, it's either feels like it was 5 years ago or it's Groundhog Day. It's just another day that, it was yesterday. But again, at the start on March 22nd is when the governor of the state of Ohio declared that non-essential businesses were required to shut down. They certainly had some bullet points around that, but they didn't give you a lot of definition of the essential part of a business. So that's where I, freaked out for a couple hours alone in my office, but then decided, I've got to get a hold of the stakeholders of Harmony Systems. We've got to start interviewing people to make that determination. Are our products essential? How is it going to affect our employees? And what is our customer saying? So that's how we did it. We looked at, number one, our employees. We called group meetings together. We talked to some of our senior employees about their overall feeling of what they know about COVID, what they know about this virus, and would they still want to work? And overwhelmingly, in our plant, at least, there was a desire to continue employment, stay on the payroll, keep things as normal as possible. So the one thing we did offer in the subsequent days after we made the determination to stay open was that we would take voluntary layoffs for anybody that wasn't comfortable working in what we were going to present to them as what we thought was a safe environment. We had approximately 10 employees out of our 125 that work on the floor that took us up on that offer. And they were employees that had underlying conditions and were some of our older employees. So we totally agreed with their decision, let them take a voluntary layoff. Again, going into our what made up our decision to be essential, we talked to our customers. And again, overwhelmingly, most of them said, we will be in business. We probably do want our products. We don't know how our product flow is going to be affected by this, but they still desire to have us as a supplier to them continue on with the business. And lastly, we took the core individuals and management team at Harmony, got them all in one room. We discussed our products. So you never feel like you're that essential, right? Is it food? Is it shelter? Is it the essential things you need in life to stay alive? Or kind of on the secondary level, is it things that people really do need? So we produce packaging type products for either food or beverage industry. We produce sanitary items for infants and young adults. So again, reviewing those products, taking into account what our customers have told us, and the most important, what our employees said to us, we determined that we are an essential business. The next thing we knew was going to be important was that communication piece. How do we continually communicate to our employees, not only on what is this coronavirus? What does it mean to them? How does it affect them in the workplace? And most importantly, how do we prevent it from spreading? But we also needed to know and look at how we communicate with our employees today. So those were some of the early changes were in communication. We traditionally have a shift meeting at the beginning of each of our 3 shifts. We're a 24-hour operation. Our shifts meetings takes place in the meeting room, which doubles as our cafeteria, and it holds 35 to 40 people. But again, we know the social distancing rules now. It would actually hold about 10 people if we all kept to the 6-foot apart rules. So we knew right away we had to change that. We went to meeting in the warehouse, or most of the time people just go right outside. I look outside because second shift's about ready to have their meeting outside. So when the weather permits, the supervisor is out there giving the information share and the lineup for the day. So that's one of the things we probably don't think is going to change. People enjoy that. We'll talk about how they clock in now. But people enjoy that, they're not all sitting right next to everyone close together, cramped up, as they say in our cafeteria. The last 3 bullets really talk about changes we've made and embraced, again, that we think are going to be lasting changes. The second one is the use of text messages. So I'm sure at some point all you guys battle the cell phone usage in your company and on a plant floor. We've now taken the stance we're going to embrace the use of cell phones as a communication tool, as a training tool, because at least in our company, just about everyone that gets employed here has a cell phone. So we've learned to use that for our text messages, for continuing education, and for the reminders of all the good prevention techniques that we've now know to prevent COVID from spreading. We went back to the traditional bulletin boards in the plant. We had one main bulletin board at an area where everyone clocked in. We knew we had to duplicate that. Your phone and text messages are only so good. Lots of people delete those. So we knew we still had to have the paper system of communicating to our employees. So now we've really overdone it. We have bulletin boards everywhere that have the duplicate information. Lastly, I'm sure most companies now have Facebook and Twitter accounts. We've embraced YouTube. We have our private channel where all employees are asked to go to get video messages, to get audio messages from either myself or the HR department. So again, we've had this whole embracing of electronic technology in our plant, driven by this, the onset of this pandemic. So now let me talk about some of the early changes that happened in our plant that we continue with today. I'll be interested at the end of this to compare and contrast with what everyone else in the audience has done. But on the left there, we have more or less what we've done with our people. So let me walk you through a few of those. We knew right away when the governor asked people to monitor their health, and the original edict was that the companies were responsible for checking temperature of their employees entering the buildings. We knew right away that that was going to be a resource drag on the company, number one. How do you contain that information and make sure you maintained all the HIPAA rules? All of those combined, we said, we're going to have our employees embrace that they're going to check their daily health. Now, we gave them some tools on that. We passed out lots of thermometers, both the old-fashioned and the digital type. And now we've moved to the no-touch infrared. Believe it or not, they're back on the market. You can go get those on Amazon, and you can get those for as low as $20. So we have stocked up on those, given those to employees and anybody that needs it, just so they can continue this health monitoring. The second thing that became very important to us with our employees is that no longer could you call in and just say, I'm sick today, I don't want to come to work. That doesn't work in the COVID environment, right? You need to know exactly what's going on with them, help them make the determination, should they stay home? Should other family members stay home? So we changed that whole call-in procedure, and we asked them to then call back in from 7 to 3:30, talk to an HR specialist that we have here, and determine, should you come back to work the next day or should you take more days off? Once an employee was at work, we've now changed our timekeeping system. So no longer do we have this central punch-in clock that many companies have. Those are all the touch points you want to eliminate in your plant. So actually, we reverted backwards. We got out the old time cards that you wrote in your start and stop times and your lunch times. We handed those out to all employees for about the first 2 months. And on the honor system, we asked them to write down their start and stop times. If there was any discrepancy or large amount of blocks of time that they weren't accounted for, we'd certainly work that out with their supervisor. But we went back to trusting our employees for keeping their own time. We've now gone one step better. I told you about we've embraced the electronics. We now have a timekeeping system that comes right on their cell phone. So as soon as they're within the parameters of the plant, it will be active that you can go ahead and clock in and clock out. So we've moved, from the old style back to the electronics. Now, on my salaried side, I did offer the salaried staff a way to work at home, providing them laptops so they can remote in and still have their desktops. Most of our salaried staff decided to come to work every day. They do have private offices. So we were very fortunate that both attitude and environment, that most people come to work every day. Although we did have to stop our meetings. We have a production meeting about every other day in the morning. We still continue those, but we do those with the Zoom call-in. So even though we're all, 10 feet from each other in our own separate offices, we're all calling in on Zoom. On the right side of the screen, I've got a few bullets of what we did actually in the plant. So we all know the rules about social distancing and 6 feet apart. That's contrary to what we learned in lean manufacturing, where you want to reduce elimination of workspace, of movement, of travel. So we've done a lot of that here at Harmony Systems over the years, but now we have to unravel a lot of that in case on many of our assembly lines where people are standing next to each other. We did have to space those out, put up some plexiglass barriers. So we've actually now reversed on it. But what we have committed to is continue to study those lines to make them more efficient, all within the parameters of good COVID-19 prevention. We did increase our outside cleaning, so we had our own internal staff that cleaned one shift a day. Now we have a 3-shift cleaning operation with outside individuals. And for the first 2 months, March, April, we had an outside service come in on the weekends and actually spray a disinfecting fog over all the work areas. So very costly, but knowing at the time we've got to pull out all the stops for COVID prevention. Many of you have done the same thing. You've suspended all your in-person plant visits. We've gone as far as locking the front door, providing the list of cell phone numbers of all the staff members. So we don't take any chances about anybody coming in, somehow getting past the lobby. We've actually locked the front door. Hopefully that'll change, because that just, to me, is not, it doesn't exude that friendly environment you want your companies to have. Lastly, we're very fortunate to have our own on-site health clinic. It's actually not on-site, it's next door to us. But Harmony Systems and 6 other companies have gone together to fund this clinic. It's free to our employees through their healthcare plan. So now we've utilized the clinic to do all the screening of COVID-19 symptoms. So no longer does Dave Richard, the president of the company, have to determine whether people do or don't have the symptoms of COVID. My HR manager and HR staff don't have to determine that. We've left that up to the professionals. So that's a thing that's going to continue, whether hopefully COVID is gone, but there'll be other health issues. This on-site clinic is going to be very good to us. So the results of all that, right? When you go to a sporting event, you have a scorecard at the end, or you have a scoreboard that tells you if you're winning or losing. We feel like we're certainly winning here at Harmony Systems. So out of our 160 employees, we've only had 1 positive COVID case to date of a 3rd shift employee. So no continued spread. Thank goodness no spread with his family. So again, are we lucky or are we good? You know, I'll take both, but I like to think we've done those changes, that we're being very diligent on our prevention methods. What are some of the next steps? So let me talk a little bit about that. Number 1, and Lee's going to mention some of this, I think the good and the bad of, you know, our employees and our attendance policy. But what we found is, because of these circumstances and continuing circumstances, we have to be extremely flexible in our attendance policy. Now, that doesn't mean that we let some people do some things and other people do others for reasons. You have to be fair, but you have to be consistent about it. But if anything, we're leaning towards we don't record attendance violations for people being off, because quite frankly, under my old rules, about half of our employment probably wouldn't be employed here. We have let them be off for various reasons. Lots of those when school started, right? The ups and downs of that. Who was in school, who was out of school, who was starting remotely, who was, you had to take kids to school. We have lots of that still going on. Unfortunately, our attendance or absenteeism has gone up because of it, but we're dealing with that in other ways. Secondly, for our employees, what we're trying to do is, again, keep this all normal for people, as normal as can be, but we want to reduce the workplace stress, so we've added a number of different employee events. So as we canceled the company picnic back in August, we replaced it with weekly raffles during the month of September, where we raffle off some pretty nice prizes of bicycles and microwaves and freezers. Every Friday, all employees' names get put in a hat. Past winners can't win again, but people look forward to that. We've had 50-50 raffles. We've had discounts on the local meat market. So we've tried to do things that, you know, replace that daily stress of thinking about what's going on with the virus today, just to make it try to bring it back to a fun workplace. But thirdly, what we've continued to have to do is reinforce with our employees all these COVID prevention practices. So I'm sure you've seen it in your plant. We saw it very early. We as human beings are very social people. We don't like to be apart. We like to talk to people. We come to work to have that camaraderie. And now we have to unravel all that, right? Social distancing, not eating together in the plant, asking our employees to eat in their vehicles. All that has to be reinforced. But again, the proof is in the pudding. We've had very little transmission or COVID brought into the plant. Now, where I've challenged my staff and the leadership team here at Harmony System, we've continued to develop this alternate workforce that we call it. It is part-time people. It is students. It is handicapped adults. We have kind of pulled out all the stops on where we can find additional employees. So even before COVID, right, in March, I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing this. The labor pool is getting smaller and smaller for various reasons. We currently have a need for 15 employees at Harmony Systems. So we have to look to these alternate work pools to make things work so we can still deliver product to our customer. Along with that, we're continuing our efforts to invest in improvement in programs out on the plant floor, increased automation, so we're not relying on a big labor market to continue in Piqua, Ohio. Lastly, I've challenged my business development manager and the salespeople. We continue to push this we attitude with our customers. So what we found is, this camaraderie. Now that we've stayed in business, we're an essential business. We've stayed open for our customers. That we did it for them. So now don't go back to the me, please. Us as a supplier, don't play me off the next supplier down the road. I was here, when you needed us. Hopefully you're going to be there for us in the future. We like to remind our customers of that. That's okay. If you've done the same thing, remind your customers of that. Lastly, and I failed to mention this at the beginning. So along this whole journey from March until now, what we've created here at Harmony Systems is a COVID-19 handbook. Very similar to Gary, you're building a big, ice equipment, and you've got a project book that walks you through all the different steps or the manual for that. We now have a manual of what we've done here at Harmony Systems all throughout this process. So heaven forbid this ever happens again, we'll pull the manual out and see what we've done and all the steps we've taken. And lastly, I will offer that manual in a Word document if other people on the webinar today want to take a look at that, see what we've done. You can certainly pull the different things out of it and use it. Lots of those are from the state of Ohio, the different postings they've had up, and that I'm offering to anybody else that would like to take a look at that. So I'll close by the quote down at the bottom. I saw it the other day and I said, wow, how apropos is this? Never let a crisis go to waste, Winston Churchill said. And so certainly that's what we've embraced. It certainly has been a crisis here that we had to react very quickly, but I think we've done a nice job. We're embracing these changes. It's given us a chance to look internally at our company and the practices that we have and what can make improvements in the future.
Dave,
thank you all.
Yes, thank you, Dave. Some great insights there. Love the we mentality comment, as well as your generosity of offering up your COVID-19 handbook, which you've shared with me, and it's an outstanding document that you and your team put together. So we thank you for today. Moving on to the investment of our employees and what goes on in those lives. Lee Geiger, again from Graydon law firm here in Cincinnati. Lee's been a tough person to reach in March and April and May and June as his clients became impacted. Lee, how did you help clients navigate and offer insights during this very unusual time?
Thanks, Gary. It was definitely an interesting time. That's to say the least about it. I used to tell people that I was an employment attorney. I now tell them that I'm a COVID attorney. But back in the March and April timeframe, it was a wild time because everybody was going through very similar things with their businesses, but everything was moving so quickly. So I didn't see a whole lot of my family during that time. That's for sure. We were working 12, 14, 15-hour days, 6 or so days a week. And there was a period in March where even on Sunday night at 10 o'clock, I was still getting phone calls from clients because that's what they needed. They had folks, a lot of companies had to do layoffs, and we did more layoffs in March, April, and May than I have in the last 20 years. So it was definitely a wild time. What I would like to talk about a little bit today is, what are some of the top issues that are on my desk? What am I seeing today? And then we'll talk a little bit about what I think is coming up next. I'm not going to go back through the history. We're not going to talk about the, over 500 employees, under 500 employees. We're not going to talk about paid sick leave or emergency FMLA. If anybody wants to ask me questions about that after the fact, just reach out. Gary's got my contact information. But here's what I'm dealing with right now. And that is, first of all, what do you do when an employee tests positive? What happens when that person calls you up and says, hey, I've got the symptoms, or I took the test and I tested positive? You're going to isolate that employee. You're going to send them home. You're going to tell them, thank you very much for letting us know. And you're also going to let their coworkers know. But here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to go and say, Gary's got COVID. You're going to go and say that an employee in our office has COVID, or an employee out on the floor has COVID. And we're letting you know that so that you can monitor yourself for symptoms. Okay. You wouldn't go around and say Gary has some horrible disease. So we're not going to announce for this. We're getting into HIPAA and Americans with Disabilities Act land right now. We're not going to announce the names of the employees. I get a lot of clients that say, they laugh at me and they say, but Lee, everybody's going to know that it's Gary that's got it because Gary's not going to be at work the next day. And to that, I tell people, you're right, but you're not going to be the one that tells them. They will figure it out on their own, but your nose is clean because you're not telling them. Another issue that I run into a lot are school and daycare closures. This was a bigger deal in August, and knock on wood, September is going smoother than I expected it would. In August, as schools were making decisions about whether to be remote or in person, employees had to make decisions. And so the companies had to decide, okay, are we going to give people time off? Or what happens if somebody's school, their child's school, is closed and it's all virtual? How am I going to deal with that issue? And that's where the paid sick leave laws and the emergency FMLA come in. It's the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, that was passed and took effect on April 1st. That law has had a few iterations since then. Actually, the law hasn't changed, but the regulations have changed a few times since then. The Department of Labor likes to issue new regulations and interpretations on Friday evenings. I'm convinced that someone there is out to just ruin the weekend of every employment lawyer in the world, or at least in the US. And so that's why they come out on Friday evenings. The next issue that comes up a lot is intermittent leave. So it's it usually goes with school and daycares. I need to be off of work 1 day a week or 2 days a week because I don't have daycare for my kid. I can get grandma to watch a few days, but I can't get grandma to watch every day. That type of intermittent leave is something that companies need to deal with. It's similar to regular FMLA. So if your company has more than 50 employees, intermittent leave is probably the bane of your existence. If you're under 50 employees, you've never really had to deal with it. The difference between this intermittent leave and regular FMLA intermittent leave is that the employer's got more flexibility on this side. Other things that I see a handful of recently are fake forms. You've got a lot of employees that will go to Google and get a note that says, Dr. Smith says that I need to be off work the next 2 weeks because I have COVID symptoms. and don't feel like you can't check those things out. We've had some clients that have then Googled Dr. Smith only to find out that Dr. Smith is a doctor for a different health system in California. So, it was clearly a fake. And we've had 2 instances where clients fired employees for falsifying COVID information. In one case, the person falsified and actually said that they didn't have it and they weren't exposed to anyone. And in fact, they had been. And so that person got fired as well. Furloughs and layoffs, just remember to do those properly. And I would like to say that we're done with furloughs, we're done with layoffs for a while, except that I'm helping 2 different clients right now with furlough and layoff issues. In some cases, it's making temporary furloughs into permanent layoffs. In other cases, though, it's, hey, we kept everybody on as long as we could. We thought we could make this work, but we just can't. Make sure when you're doing these furloughs and layoffs, there's a method to your madness. So you're not just saying, gosh, I really have not liked working with Sue for a long time or Bob for a long time. They're horrible. They're gone. You need to have some metrics for why you're doing it, because the next wave is going to be lawsuits. Just reading an article from a journal today that the next wave will be lawsuits from people who feel that they were wrongfully furloughed or wrongfully laid off because of their age or their race or their gender. Okay, so what's coming up next? We'll just keep flying through these. School closure issues in September and October. I mentioned that things were going smoother in September than I thought they would. Frankly, my kids are in 3 different schools, and none of those schools have had any real COVID issues at all to speak of. If that continues, that trend continues, then the schools will continue to operate as they are, and there won't be major changes. I frankly thought that there would be more spikes and that we might be dealing with more companies that have employees that say, look, I've got a 7-year-old kid that's now learning at home. I've got to be home. So be on the lookout. That might happen. December. Okay, this is the cynical side of me coming out. The law that gives paid sick leave up to 80 hours to employees expires on December 31st. Now, will Congress renew that? I don't know. That's the 3rd bullet there. I suspect that they will renew it, but I also would have expected that there would have been a replacement for the CARES Act in place by August 1st, and there wasn't. So they have 4 months notice, and we'll see whether they have a replacement in place by January 1. But the current law giving the leave expires December 31st. Cynical side of me says there will be plenty of people who decide that they've been loyal employees. They haven't taken any time off all year for COVID. They didn't get a good vacation this year. And they're tired of hearing all of the other people that did take leaves complain. And they're going to say, I want mine too. And they will take, they will suddenly need the last 2 weeks off because they're suddenly experiencing COVID symptoms. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Hopefully I'm wrong on that, but you might have that on your radar. The last bullet that I've got here are vaccines, and will you require? Companies are going to have to face that question, not this year, but next. Are you going to require all of your employees to have a COVID vaccine? You can. You need to have some exceptions for disability and for religion, but you could say everybody has to have a vaccine. When will you be able to do that? I wish I knew. If I did, I'd be rich. The President Trump says that vaccines will be available by early November. Well, even if that is true, even if there is a vaccine ready, everything that I'm reading says that our supply chain will not be ready for vaccinations across the country, that there will be certain people who are high risk that will get vaccinated, but that the regular people will be looking at next spring or even summer before a vaccine is readily available. So that's coming up on the horizon, something for you to start thinking about now. Okay, and the last slide that I have is things for you to keep in mind, and that is that the old laws still apply, right? Family Medical Leave Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, and the WARN Act, which deals with layoffs. You still need to follow those. Don't lose your mind through all of this. I've seen a lot of people suddenly forget the good HR skills and business owner skills that they've had for the last 20, 30 years. And the rules still apply. Next thing is, don't discriminate. As you're making decisions about who to lay off or who to furlough or how that's going to be done, make sure that you've got a good basis for it. You know, you can't just sit down one night and decide, okay, I've got to cut 5 people. These are the 5 I want. Boom. You need to say, I need to cut 5 people, and then print out a list of your team and figure out, okay, what are the reasons that I'm letting these people go? Can I document it? Were they the last hired and therefore the first fired? Are they people whose performance evaluation scores show that they were the poorest performers? Or are there other metrics that show that they're poor performers? If not, that can be problematic for you, because it's going to be difficult for you to prove that Susie, who's been with you for 20 years, was a poor performer and should be let go, and that Mary, who's been with you for 3 years, should be kept. Because if Susie was such a horrible person, horrible performer, why did she last for 20 years? Next thing is be fair, not nice. And by that kind of builds on what Dave was saying. We've had a few clients that have said, okay, I'm not going to have Bob come into work. I'm going to tell him he has to work from home because Bob is 68 years old and has COPD, and I don't want to risk that Bob's going to get sick at work. And this is for Bob's own good. Well, that might be true. It might be for Bob's own good. And your decision is well intended. Nonetheless, in the eyes of the law, you've just discriminated against Bob because of his age and disability. So you don't want to end up on the wrong side of a lawsuit, because you will lose that one. And the last one is just be flexible. And Dave talked a lot about flexibility, especially with attendance. There are, as Dave said, half his employees would have been fired under his old attendance policy, and that's true for companies across the country. And with that, Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you if you or anybody else have questions.
Thank you. Great insights, and truly appreciate the value you brought to all of us today. And it certainly, from the employee standpoint, has been a challenging time for many of us. So we do have some questions. The first one to you, Lee. If the company requires employees to be vaccinated and there are side effects or issues later, what could be the company's liability to that?
I'd be surprised if the company had much liability at all in that situation. The state of Ohio just passed a law providing some immunity to employers. Actually, it just took effect this week. So I think that will be helpful. And, companies have been allowed to require flu shots for quite some time. Most companies don't actually require it. They just bring Walgreens on site to do the flu shots. But if you work in healthcare, you've probably been required to have a flu shot for a while.
Okay. So to Dave, did the state of Ohio mandate any of the changes that you made to your operations? What did you use as your primary template for those changes? And do you plan that the changes you have made are more temporary or permanent?
Yeah, good question. Maybe the first part's for Lee, but I'll answer it in that most of the suggestions, I'll call it, came down from the state of Ohio. They weren't mandates. In the social distancing, it was do everything you can in your plant. If you can't get people 6 feet apart, put up some kind of barriers. They didn't tell you how to do it, what to do, but I think they gave you enough of the here's some best practices, here's some other examples. So again, Lee, mandates from the state, even the use of masks right now, very controversial whether you believe in the effectiveness of them, but they've left it up to the company that, you should wear a mask unless there's a company policy that states otherwise, or it's detrimental for in a certain environment. So in our plant, I'll give you that example. We've said we're an unair conditioned plant. Anytime the interior temperature is above 90 degrees, mask will not be mandatory. So many of the days, in early August, late July, when the mask mandate came out, we imposed that. The state of Ohio, we didn't ask the state if that was right or wrong. We just did that. Lee?
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Dave. A lot of the things that folks think are mandates are not. They're recommendations. There are definitely two columns in the governor's the forms that he puts out, one that is required and one that is recommended. So, a lot of the stuff, I agree with you, David, common sense, and you can work with it.
Yeah, it leads into the second question. What was the primary template? It really is the common sense. So lots of the changes we made in the plant were just for that distancing. So, are these going to be permanent changes? Yes, in some of the instances, if it didn't affect the efficiency that we've recorded in the past for that assembly line that we have, we don't think we're going to tinker with that and bring it all back together. But if it is, for some reason, we've experienced some longer lead times, longer tack times, we call them in manufacturing, we will reverse on those. Now, do I want to reverse on the number of people in the cafeteria? Absolutely. I want us to be social beings again. I want us to have group meetings where we're very close to each other. We can ask questions. Everybody hears the question, gets a good answer. We will reverse on some of those. Will I reverse on the cleaning procedures we have in the plant? Probably not. I question myself, why weren't we doing those before? We've experienced, flu outbreaks in the plant in the past. I'm hoping that some of these changes we've made are really going to affect and lessen the effects of the flu coming up this season.
Dave, when you had a COVID case at your facility, how did your other employees react, and how did you handle that reaction?
Yeah, good question. And I'll add one other question to it. How did I think my employees are going to react? I thought all heck was going to break loose, honestly, because it was our very first case. We decided within the hour of it being reported that if we didn't put out a letter and put out an announcement that we knew of the positive case, given some indication of is it first shift, second shift, third shift, and a little bit about the situation without mentioning the name. So we did all that rightly. I think we quelled the reaction I thought we were going to get, which was the panic, and everybody wants to be off work the next day. So I think we did a good job of explaining, in general, where the employee worked, which was a very isolated area, how long he had worked before he reported symptoms, where they believed they potentially got the COVID case from. So again, we're going to be very honest with our employees. If he said, I think I got it at work, we would have done a lot more tracing on where that could have happened. But he said that it was acquired at a family get-together, a graduation party. So certainly we believe that. We put that in our announcement letter, again, without giving away the name of the employee. But again, within 2 hours, everybody knew who it was. I think most people realized they weren't working around that employee, and that we had done a fairly good job. Oh, and we shut down the plant at 1 o'clock that day. We heard about it at 9. We shut down for 2 hours. We brought in the disinfectant fogging company and then restarted on second shift. So again, we didn't have to do that. Did I think that was probably good to do as a gesture of we're going to take this serious? I think that went a long way to not only truly clean the plant, but show that we're going to be serious when we get alerted to a positive case.
Great, thank you. Lee, can members of management or HR be sued or held liable for COVID-related incidents, i.e., does the protection that is offered to the employer in Ohio also protect the individual employees?
So I'm going to give an answer to that 6 months ago I would have been embarrassed to say, but today I'm comfortable with it. And the answer to that is I don't know. And 6 months ago, I felt like I had to have the answer to everything at all times. And what I learned through all this COVID stuff is the law changes all the time. And so the law that just passed that Lori's asking about here literally just passed 2 days ago.
Right.
And so I have read an article about it. I have not yet read the entire text of the law. We would have clients say, okay, I need to know the answer to this. How is this going to shake out? And what all employment lawyers across the country had to get used to saying is, I don't know. Here's how I think it's going to shake out, but who knows, because we've never been through this before. So here's how I think it will shake out. I think that there will be immunity for individual employees, and I think that HR folks won't need to worry about that. But I can't answer that right here definitively because it's only 2 days old, and it's crazy because back in March and April in particular, it was trying to stay abreast of the law. I had never done. I did 2 webinars before March where I led the webinar. Since then, I've done at least 15, and 2 or 3 times during those, the law literally changed mid-webinar. So that's just how quickly all of this has changed on us.
Yeah, that's what makes it a little difficult, Lee, is that they can continually move the goalposts. So we'll make this our last question to respect everybody's time. What is the one thing, Dave, that you've learned because of COVID forced you to change that will be a positive impact moving forward?
So I'm going to give you a real simple one. I learned the importance of really minimizing your touch points with the general public, whether it's at home, in grocery stores, or here at my factory. So, something I probably should have known about, right? But I'm not a germaphobe by nature. I'm still going to shake people's hands. Certainly, I miss that about doing business. But I'm very conscious about where I put my hands in airports, on airplanes, in public spaces. And what we've tried to do here at Harmony is eliminate those. So anywhere we had a door that was closed most of the time and we could open up or literally take off that door, we did. We went to all automated flush toilets. We went to all automated hand dryers, right? It's just a thing that we never gave any thought of in the past. And I think many companies have. Or those things wouldn't have been invented. But it's the whole thing about the transmission of virus and other diseases. Certainly me on a personal level, that was reinforced, and I've tried to bring that into the plant and help with that.
Excellent. Well, Dave and Lee, virtual applause from all of us to the 2 of you. You did a wonderful job today presenting insights, and we're just very thankful. For all of our guests that are here with us, we appreciate your investment of time today and being with us as we continue to invest in you and bring some interesting insights to our remarkable clients. And we want to wish everyone a remarkable day. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.